It's always a pleasure when this guy is on. We worked together for years at NFL Network. He was alongside making sure I didn't screw up when I called my first Senior Bowl, and he was amazingly supportive for that. Now calls games on Westwood and does a million other things as well. Former GM of the Raiders, Mike Mayock. It is good to see you.
Andrew, it's always my pleasure, pal.
How you been?
Doing great. I mean, life's good. Doing a lot of work. It's all football related, which keeps me around the kind of people I like to be around and keeps me busy. And I still get a little opportunity to play a little golf here and there down here in southeastern Georgia. So life's really good, man.
What are you shooting these days?
I didn't want you to ask me that because the golf gods might shoot me down. I shot a 78 yesterday, which
look at that.
I'm a lousy golfer. And so that was really different for me. And I don't really want to walk that out there anywhere, let alone the Rich Eisen Show with Andrew Siciliano, because
wow.
I'm going to go out there tomorrow and shoot 94. So that would be my normal.
Hey, it's about the consistency of the tape. We see the flash plays, but can you make those plays consistently?
No,
obviously. Is it repeatable?
I'm totally, this golf thing has got me hooked a little bit because it's counterintuitive to every sport I've ever played. And I played baseball and football in college. I played 4 sports in high school. I was always pretty good at all of them, but all of them revolved around being quick, twitchy, powerful, trying to be as fast as you could, immediate decision making. And golf, it's like the quicker, twitchier, more intense you get, the worse you get. And for me, that's a challenge.
Calm through the ball. Mike Mayock shooting a 78 yesterday, 22 days before the draft. Now we're 21 days before the draft. Before we get to that, I want to go back to the annual meeting in Florida a couple of days ago. And you're the Philly guy, so Philly perspective here. Mike, Tush Push, should they ban it or not?
This is a hard one for me, being a West Philadelphia kid and having done 5 years of preseason games for the Eagles, loving Howie and Jeffrey Lurie and all about that organization. I love them. But me personally, I don't like the Tush Push. And it has nothing to do with player security. It's really all about, for me, if you can't pull a player, why can you push a player? And the rules was really started 20 years ago for different reasons. It morphed into this. And what I really hate, though, Andrew, is it affects one team because they do it better than anybody else. And really what I think's happening here is, under the guise of player safety, I think teams are going to try and legislate this out of the game because it's an Eagles advantage. So every team in the division is looking at the Eagles saying, why should we play them when it's 1st and 9? Every series they have the football. And I think over time, they're going to legislate this thing out of football. And I think they're going to hide behind player safety. And I think it's a shame for the Eagles, even though personally, I don't like the play.
And I'm with you. I think that's what's going to happen if the vote's 16-16 and they table it till May. Normally, as you know, when they table things, it means they're going to try to whip the votes over the next couple of months, and they likely
Correct.
will get them. I'm with you on if you can't pull a player, why can you push a player? And I do think we go back to the 2005 rule. But I also think, Mike, with Jeff Stoutland, who's the best in the business, and he and Howie are on the same page of drafting, identifying, drafting, developing, and then maintaining that program in their room and always having the next guy up. Not all of these quarterback sneaks have Jalen actually being pushed from behind. I think they're going to find a way to still be a very effective sneak team, even if it doesn't involve Dallas Goedert shoving him in the back.
Well, I agree. And I have no problem with quarterback sneak. I mean, that's been a part of our game forever. I just don't want Dallas Goedert or anybody else back there. I think the reason they changed the rule back then, Andrew, that you just referred to, was I think they had a lot of offensive linemen kind of picking people off piles 10 yards down the field. And so rather than taking shots, they allowed them to push. So we've gotten completely away from whatever the spirit of that rule was, and now one team does it supremely well, and they're going to get penalized. And not only do they have Jeff Stoutland in an offensive line, but they got a quarterback that squats 600. He squats the house, and nobody else can do it. Other teams don't even want their quarterback doing it. They got tight ends stepping under center. So I'm with you. I think the Eagles will find a way to continue to make it work. It just might not be at the same rate of success.
Exactly. Talking to Mike Mayock 21 days before the draft here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's just assume, and Mike, you haven't heard anything, Cam Ward's likely going one, right? We think that that's going to be the thing. Okay, so let's assume that. Mike's nodding for the radio audience. Then, Mike, what on earth do the Browns do it to?
I'm intrigued. I know Andrew very well, and I really know Kevin Stefanski well, another Philly guy. And they're both highly, highly intelligent in any industry. And so here we are. They traded for Kenny Pickett from the Eagles. And I'm sitting here going, they have to take a quarterback at 2, right? But if Cam Ward's gone and they don't have a grade on Shador that justifies anywhere near that, you can easily sit there in a behind closed doors and go, look, we already have our developmental young quarterback. He was a first-round pick in 22. His name's Kenny Pickett. So why don't we continue to work with this kid? He's got a little bit of NFL experience. He was a first-round pick for a reason. And we think we had a better grade on him coming out than we do on Shador or Jackson Dart or any of these guys. So he can be our young developmental guy, but here's the caveat. Now we got to go find a veteran. And Aaron Rodgers, if he goes to Pittsburgh like we all think, at the end of the day, what does that leave for a quality veteran starter? To me, it's Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr. Now, when you look at those two, nothing's coming out of New Orleans that would suggest they would allow him to go. He's their starter this year. You look at Atlanta, it's a different conversation. Kirk Cousins wants out. Atlanta is willing to let him go, assuming they get what they want in return. I'm assuming on top of that, Atlanta wants to wait post June 1st because then they can let the salary cap mitigate over a 2-year period instead of 1. So it's a little bit of a quarterback roulette game because after those two quarterbacks, and keep in mind, they both have no trade clauses. If you don't get either one of them, then we're in the Carson Wentz, Ryan Tannehill, Joe Flacco world. And you got to be careful because I'm not sure you want Kenny Pickett under center week 1 in Cleveland. And by the way, you'll be calling that game, Andrew.
And it could be against Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you never know. It's fascinating. Let's say they don't go Shador, all right? And the Browns are in Colorado right now. Pro Day is tomorrow there. Yep. Expected to meet, as they've said. They said it this week in Florida with both Travis Hunter and Shador Sanders. Let's say Shador gets to 9, Mike, and hypothetically the Saints turn in the card. Well, then does Derek Carr want out? We already know that Kirk Cousins would like a little bit of clarity. I don't want to go to a team that's going to take a quarterback in the first round. I might want to wait until after the draft. But after the draft, there may not be a job that then is open at that point. So I'm with you. It's kind of a game of roulette. And there are a lot of Browns fans that say, we'll trade up to 1. Well, the Titans may not want to trade. Everyone has a price. But, Mike, we did the research, and Jack Andrade and I both dove into it. Jack Andrade, great NFL researcher, handles the draft. There has never been a trade from 2 to 1, ever. There's no precedent. There's been a trade from 3 to 1, but that was 1975 when the Falcons flipped with Baltimore, the Colts, and moved up 3 to 1 for George Kuhn's and all-pro right tackle. That was it, 1 for 1. So when people say, well, the Titans won 2 ones, I say that's absurd. But when you're on the clock, if they're not entirely into Cam Ward, maybe it's doable. But this idea that you could just flip them a 3 and get there, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't see it in any way, shape, or form. On the clock or elsewise, I don't think people want to panic on the clock. That decision's going to be made with your owner. When you're picking number 1, your owner's sitting in there going, what are we doing? So it's the GM, the head coach, the owner. They're all going to have that decided well before they put a card in the first night of the draft.
And that owner, Amy Adams Strunk in Tennessee, has to think big picture. We're building a new stadium as well. And if we think this guy is the guy, Cam Ward, it would be nice to have that quarterback and have that piece in place as you work towards that new future in downtown Nashville. Talking to Mike Mayock here. Other thoughts on the draft here, Mike? Day 2 quarterbacks, if you want to go there, is there a guy? Traditionally, day 2 quarterbacks don't necessarily hit. Jalen Hurts being the outlier at pick 53. Is there a guy? Dak Prescott, day 3 quarterback. This is an interesting group that you would plant a flag for?
Here's where I stand on this group. Jackson Dart might go in the first, just out of necessity. To your point, I don't know where Shador's going right now. If Cleveland passes on him and he's sitting there with a bouquet of roses at number 3, the Giants have a head coach and a GM a little bit on the hot seat. And if they take Shador, it doesn't make their team immediately better. It might over time, but, they might rather have a position player. Which does make their team better immediately. So Jackson Dart could be even play in the first round. He might not be. I look at him very similarly as I do to Shador. I think he's a little better athlete than Shador, but neither of them is dynamic. I think he throws with some anticipation. I think he's a tough kid that can run the football also. I think he's accurate. I struggle a little bit with him late in games with a lot of not pressure of outside sources, but I'm talking about blitzing type of pressure. If you watch him against LSU last year, Alabama in 23, took 11 sacks in those 2 games and really struggled down the stretch when his offense needed points, especially this year against LSU. And again, I'm not putting all that on him. There were a lot of free runners, but his offense didn't have the answers they needed. And that's a long way of saying he's a developmental guy for me, as all of these guys are. No offense. Okay. I think they're all developmental guys. Tyler Shuck, I don't care that he's 25. He'll be 26 in September. I do care about the injury history. Guys that get hurt in college tend to get hurt in the pros. He started 1 season out of 7 in college football for the entire season. Then I go to the guy that I get a twinkle in my eye on a little bit, and that's Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And when I look at it, I go, okay, what does he do well? Well, he's a runner like I put him in the same category as Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson. How fast is he? As fast as he needs to be. And he's 20 pounds heavier than those 2 guys. Does he have some accuracy and inconsistency? 100%, which is why him going in the 2nd or 3rd round, Andrew, I think is perfect. First round quarterbacks come with this pressure and you got to play them right now. I'd love to see him behind like the LA Rams and Matthew Stafford. Are you kidding me? No pressure to play, the opportunity to sit behind an established quarterback and play caller in Sean McVay. I think he's a 2 to 3 year project, but if somebody rubs this piece of coal, I think he could turn into a diamond.
Yeah, his cut-ups, his scramble cut-ups are absurd. Yep. Absolutely absurd. You're like, oh, he doesn't have an angle. Oh, wow, look, he just got past 5 guys, turned the corner, and he's in the end zone. Like, holy. But you go to Mobile, and Mike, you were there. I mean, there are a lot of balls in the dirt. I mean, there are a lot of throws to the flat that got airmailed over the sideline. And you're like, oof.
Yeah, and I think there was some with understanding of a new offense and what he's trying to do and timing and all those things. No excuses here. I've already said he's a major developmental project. When you watch, you mentioned the cut-ups on the run game. If you watch the cut-ups on the pass game, you can see him throw a 17-yard dig, a deep in route, in between 2 defenders right here with unbelievable velocity and accuracy, and then 3 snaps later have the guy wide open in the same place and throw it 8 yards over his head. So there's massive inconsistencies that need to be worked on. And that's why he's got to go to a team where they recognize it and they don't just throw him out there in the scout team offense, right? And expect that he's going to get better that way. They're going to give him real opportunities to improve. So he's a guy that he's got a lot of glaring deficiencies, but I love his upside.
Mike Mayock, what about the wide receiver class, top to bottom? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think wide receiver and offensive line, Andrew, I struggle this year with both those positions. I mean, at wideout, I would tell you that there's 3 or 4 at most first-round picks, nobody in the top 10. You got Tet McMillan from Arizona, big guy, contested catch, wins with length and physicality. Matthew Golden from Texas, I really like him, and I think he's skyrocketed since the season ended. And not only is he quick, but he ran 4.29 at the combine. He's fast. He runs good routes. He's tough. I think he's ascended through the process, and I think he could be the first wide receiver off the board. Some people like the Ohio State kid, Ibuka, who I think is really good football player, well coached, solid, great routes, hands, toughness, will block. And then you look at Luther Burden from Mizzou, and you go, wow, he's got a little more talent, a little more upside, but today he's not as good as Ibuka. Those are the 4 that I like. After that, I think there's 20 guys that could go anywhere depending on what flavor you're looking for. And I don't think that the second and third rounds are going to be anywhere near as deep as they have been in the past 4 or 5 years.
And teams need playmakers. It's a passing league, despite what we saw last year and kind of a return to the run game. And what about the O-line, Mike? Because as much conversation has been had about Will Campbell's arm size, there's not a lot of conversation about the rest of the class.
Yeah. A guy I fell in love with early in the process was Armand Membu. And I was like, why is there no juice surrounding this kid? And I put a pretty big grade on him. And it looks like everybody else now has also, once the tape's circulated and been around. And I think they're the first 2 tackles off the board. Some people like Membu better than Will Campbell. Will Campbell to me is a tackle, and yeah, I mean, I hear people talking about guard and all the rest, but I like his hand use. I like the way it's tied to his feet. He's going to have to anchor a little bit better, but I think he can. I don't worry about that half an inch, 33 or 33 and a half. Everybody wants 34, but really it's more tied to what kind of player are you? How do you play the position? I think they're the first 2 tackles off the board. Kelvin Banks from Texas is a tackle that some people want to play at guard. I think he lives at tackle. I think he'd be a good tackle. Really solid, good in the run game, has some technical deficiencies in the pass game he's going to have to work with. And then after that, that's what I mean. We've been getting 5 or 6 tackles in the first round the last few years. After those 3, it's kind of like Josh Simmons from Ohio State coming off a significant injury. Played well prior to the injury. A guy I like from Minnesota more than most people, Ariante Ursary, who probably goes in the second round. But after those 5 guys or so, it's not like there's a great second and third round piece of this like there has been in a lot of drafts. And I'm kind of intrigued because like a team like Seattle, say, they traded their quarterback to the Raiders, Geno Smith. They got a 3rd round pick. They traded their wide out to Pittsburgh. They get a 2nd round pick. So now they have 5 picks of the first 92. And they got heavy needs at both O-line and wide out. So it'll be really interesting to me to see what they do at 18. Okay, you're going to take a lineman first because you're worried about the depth in the 2nd round. But what about the depth at wide out also? They've got 50 and 52 in the 2nd round, which I think can get them quality players, especially interior offensive linemen. But they can also use the 2nd or 3rd round picks to move up in the 1st round if they want a Will Campbell or an Armand Membu. So I think Seattle's a team to kind of keep an eye on in those first 2 days of the draft because they've got the ammunition to move up if they need to.
And with the new quarterback in Sam Darnold, although you could look at that contract and say, how long-term really is that deal? So keep that in mind as well. Yep. Also keep in mind that Mike Mayock shot a 78 yesterday.
More importantly.
Mike,
wow.
It is always good to talk to you. We thank you for your time. Hit him straight. Talk to you soon.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks, brother. Good catching up.
You got it. Mike Mayock, everybody.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.